country singer Billy Ray Cyrus's achy breaky heart seemed forever cured with the arrival of daughter Miley Cyrus. Christened at birth as Destiny Hope, she quickly lived up to her name, achieving worldwide fame as the lead player in Disney's smash hit tween TV series Hannah Montana. Telling the story of a pop star who hides her true identity so she can go through school like any other teenage girl, the show was a smash from the get-go, soon becoming cable TV's hottest show for the tween demographic. The Hannah Montana phenomenon soon expanded into stage shows, 3D concert films, and multi-platinum records. Through it all, the ever-innocent Miley Cyrus exuded sweetness and light. But all her daddy's hopes and dreams looked dashed when Entertainment Tonight reported that his little girl had posed topless in a shoot for Vanity Fair magazine at the tender age of 15. The full photograph, taken by Annie Leibovitz, was published on the New York Times website. In fact, Miley hadn't posed topless as Entertainment Tonight had reported. She was wrapped in a modesty-preserving bedsheet. But that didn't stop the good parents of America complaining that Miley had betrayed their trust in her godliness. But Miley's fellow entertainers were quick to come to her defense.
You know, if the question is, you know, but she's 15 years old, should she have done that? It's like, yeah, but most 15-year-olds don't have their own show, aren't like rock stars. I mean, you can't compare it. And really, if she's going to do that, she did it with the most amazing woman, with this Annie Leibovitz. I mean, I kind of think it's all good.
The confirmed Christian did her best to put it all behind her with her second album, Breakout. Her first not to be tied to her Hannah Montana persona.
Hopefully people after the Breakout record, I feel like it was appropriately titled, because I hope this does kind of break me out as more of a songwriter more than just a pop singer.
But more controversy was just around the corner for young Miley. At the Teen Choice Awards in 2009, she danced just a little too provocatively next to a dance pole for some discerning parent viewers, even if the pole was on top of an innocent ice cream pushcart. While some mums and dads may have had some issues with Miley's emergence as a young woman of the spotlight, her real supporters, the kids, didn't seem to have a problem at all.
Like, she's not going to turn into one of those bad people like Britney Spears and everybody, and she's like a really good role model and stuff. She's really nice.
This gender bender bravely brought a new kind of musical masculinity to the masses back in the 1980s, and he rode the wave of success right to the top with his band Culture Club. But after a couple of hit albums, the wheels fell off for the band. George O'Dowd, better known as Boy George, found himself with a bad case of heartache and a nasty little heroin addiction. Since then, he's maintained a core fan base through a range of creative projects. But he sorely tested their commitment when he was found guilty of falsely imprisoning a male escort in his London flat in 2005. Things turned sour for George when two of his closest friends died from drug overdoses within weeks of each other. Soon after that, the band broke up. The true extent of George's own hard drug use was exposed when his younger brother David went on national television in the UK to make a plea for his older brother to clean up his act. But the only act Boy George was interested in was his music and media career. He became quite the Renaissance man, embarking on solo musical projects, radio shows, DJing and memoir writing. Through it all, he never shied away from taking a strong stand on sexual politics.
You know, everybody thinks we live in this liberal world, but people are still making records about shooting homosexuals.
The dawn of the new millennium gave Boy George the unique opportunity to play his demons out on stage with the hit West End musical Taboo. Named after the uber-cool London nightclub of the 1980s, the show explored the young Boy George's rapid rise to fame and his just as rapid descent into the tortures of heroin addiction.
It's kind of roughly it's sort of a bit like this. When I'm playing the Australian performance artist Lee Bowery, and I'm being played, the younger me is being played by Ewan Morton, who's sitting over there.
His drug habit finally caught up with him in 2005, when police investing a robbery found cocaine in his New York apartment. In a plea bargain deal, George agreed to enter a drug rehabilitation program in England and performed 5 days community service with New York City's Department of Sanitation. He remained defiant in the face of humiliation.
Oh, don't ask me about it. It's done. No one cares. Done it.
But do you feel, I mean, how do you feel about it now? You know,
Oh, I don't feel humiliated or less of a person. I think I'm fabulous.
But things took a turn for the worse for George the following year, when a nude photo shoot in his London apartment went oh so wrong, and he was accused of falsely imprisoning a male escort by chaining him to a wall. Even George's lawyer argued that his client had behaved like a drug-crazed idiot, and he was imprisoned for 4 months of a 15-month term. Ever the showman, Boy George isn't done with making headlines just yet. He started racing at the age of 4 in a go-kart powered by a lawnmower engine, and has gone on to become the most successful driver in the history of Formula One motorsport. The most driver championships, the most race victories, the fastest laps, the most pole positions. These are just a few of the titles held by German Formula One maestro Michael Schumacher. His concentration is legendary. His ability to push his car to the limit for sustained periods is without peer. But his ruthless approach to winning has not been without its detractors. In some quarters, the question has been asked, will Michael Schumacher win at any cost? Auto manufacturer Ferrari has certainly had no problems with his winning approach. When Michael joined them in 1996, they'd won only 2 races in the past 5 seasons. By 2006, he'd led Ferrari through perhaps the greatest purple patch in the history of motorsport. Formula One got its first taste of Michael's ruthless will to win in the final race of that year's Formula One season. Leading British ace Damon Hill in the Drivers' Championship by only 1 point, Schumacher collided with Hill, wiping them both out of the race and gifting himself the championship. The jury is still out as to whether Schumacher intentionally engineered the collision, but the British press had no doubts as to Schumacher's intentions. They soon labelled him the Red Baron, in reference to the notorious World War I German fighter pilot. History repeated in 1997, when, in the last race of the season, Schumacher was leading Canadian Jacques Villeneuve by 1 point in the Drivers' Championship. At lap 48, when Villeneuve overtook Schumacher, the German flyer responded by running his vehicle into Villeneuve's. Schumacher came out of the incident worse for wear and was forced to retire from the race. He found himself the first driver in the history of Formula One to be disqualified from a world championship.
It's something I obviously accept due to a mistake and action has happened on the circuit in Jerez, and I think it's for me personally it's quite a tough decision if you see losing my 2nd position, because with Ferrari to have a 2nd position in my record, it means something. But on the other side, I have to admit that I have done a mistake and I have done what I did, and I have to accept, and I do accept, the penalty.
But the disqualification did little to dampen his will to win. In 2006, he stopped his car on the track during qualification laps, blocking his main contender for that season's title, Fernando Alonso. Schumacher claimed he'd merely stalled, but stewards wouldn't have a bar of it, and he was stripped of pole position. Although a ferocious competitor, Schumacher also has a very human side, making regular multi-million-dollar contributions to charity organizations all over the world. He even promotes road safety.
Obviously, when I'm being a racing driver and having a certain amount of success, people may conclude that I continue racing on the road, but that is absolutely wrong, because roads are not made for racing. roads are made for, as I said before, from A to B in a safe way.
Michael actually broke his little mantra on road safety when he recently commandeered a taxi and drove like the clappers to make the airport for a flight back to Switzerland. Some habits die hard. She came into the world as Courtney Harrison, but that plain Jane moniker was never going to do the trick, for the femme fatale Rolling Stone magazine would come to label the most controversial woman in the history of rock. During a stint as an exotic dancer in LA, she became Courtney Love, and before long found her place as the queen of the grunge rock era by swapping wedding vows with Nirvana frontman Kurt Cobain. After Kurt's death, Courtney went on to cast herself in the lead role of her own life's production, taking her band Hole on successful world tours to album sale triumph. But the bright lights and success were only a temporary salve from whatever hole lay within Courtney herself. And after a lifetime of drug abuse, she was soon on the way to court-enforced rehab. Courtney's early childhood had been far from smooth sailing, with her parents separating soon after her birth. During later divorce proceedings, claims were made that Courtney's dad gave her LSD as a toddler. True or not, Courtney's mum obtained custody, and they settled in a hippie commune in Oregon. At the age of 12, she learned her first hard lesson of showbiz, missing out on entry into the Mickey Mouse Club. Her rejection perhaps not surprising, when her audition piece consisted of reading a poem by suicidal poet Sylvia Plath. But clearly she still bears the scars of that disappointment.
There's a letter I wrote when I was really young where, well, the rejection from the Mickey Mouse Club kind of formed me.
Determined to make it in the business, in 1989 she taught herself to play guitar and formed her band Hole. Their first album, Pretty on the Inside, achieved moderate success, but real fame arrived via her relationship with Kurt. In 1991, Kurt's band Nirvana released Nevermind, the album that defined the sound of grunge rock in the early 90s, making Kurt and Courtney royalty of the scene. They married in 1992, and their baby Frances Bean was born just months later. But the sailing was never smooth. When Frances was only a few weeks old, the LA County Department of Children's Services took the couple to court, claiming that their drug use made them unfit parents. Kurt and Courtney lost custody of their child, only regaining it when they agreed to regular drug testing and visits from a social worker. After a series of near-death experiences through drug overdose, Kurt finally committed suicide in 2004. But through all the pain, there was redemption shortly after, when Hole's aptly titled album Live Through This went platinum, and Spin magazine declared it Album of the Year. More success followed with a Golden Globe nomination for her role in the film The People vs. Larry Flynt. Topping a golden period, Hole's third album, Celebrity Skin, made it onto several Album of the Year lists, going multi-platinum. But the tide was changing in the musical scene, and Hole's grunge rock ethos was looking a little tired by the turn of the millennium. Amidst personal disputes between the band, they broke up in 2002. With Courtney's musical cred crumbling, she descended into an ever-deepening spiral of drug abuse, culminating in her arrest outside her boyfriend and manager's LA home in 2003. Caught breaking windows to enter his property, she was charged with disorderly conduct, as well as being under the influence of cocaine. Released on bail only 4 hours later, Courtney was treated in hospital for what police described as a medical emergency, leading to being charged for illegal possession of prescription painkillers. 8 days later, Courtney lost custody of Frances Bean, and she was ordered to complete a 3-day health evaluation in hospital. She didn't complete the evaluation, but she did manage to turn up to court to face her charges, and she was in good spirits.
How are you feeling today? I feel great, and I'm glad you care so much.
As a result of her court case, Courtney was ordered to enroll in an 18-month drug rehabilitation program involving random drug testing and counseling. Under the terms of the plea bargain, Courtney could avoid a jail term and a record of conviction as long as she stayed off the drugs.
You guys back up, please. Come on. Yeah, stop. I have to stop drinking. It's fun. This is funny. I mean, it's not funny at all. It's profound. It's deep. But I want to see if I can do it.
Courtney's period of probation didn't get off to a good start when she failed to show in court to face charges over assaulting a woman at her boyfriend's home. But there was little confusion over the cause of her ills when she was admitted to hospital in LA just a few months later. She was under the influence of drugs and accordingly had violated the terms of her parole. The courts were none too pleased.
My belief was that you need to go to the county jail. And I really planned on taking you in today because I think that you need to hit rock bottom before you make a decision what you're going to do in the future. I think you either need a long-term drug program or a long term in the county jail. That's what I believe.
Courtney, in fact, got off lightly with a 28-day treatment program. But this program was also violated, and she was sentenced to 6 months in lockdown rehab. In need of some good publicity, her 2006 memoir Dirty Blonde, The Diaries of Courtney Love, allowed her to tell her life story in her own particular way.
I'd been written about so many times and had so many articles written about me that this was something where I could present, you know, fractured parts of myself, but myself, and there's no editor saying, you know, putting me in a box and making me into something I'm not. This is me, you know, like it or not. This is how I think, how I write lyrics, things that have happened to me, you know, real themes.
Rock star, widow, drug addict and mum, Courtney Love has lived through it all. Since shedding the weight and cleaning up her act, she's looking to make a comeback with a brand new whole album called Nobody's Daughter. Any man that sells over 1 billion records needs little in the way of introduction. Elvis Presley was arguably the greatest single icon of popular culture of the 20th century. His name, image and voice instantly recognizable around the world. But all this makes it easy to forget that his rise to fame was fraught with controversy, as he injected mainstream music with a kind of intense sexual energy never seen before. Born in Mississippi into a family of humble means, Elvis grew up in poor black neighborhoods. His rise to stardom was built on taking the rhythm and blues of African America and transplanting it into the new music for white folk, rock and roll. With rock and roll a black American term for sex itself, Elvis knew from the beginning that his sexuality would be a key aspect of his musical power, and his power was far-reaching, giving little regard to most cultural boundaries, including gender.
He's that good. He can sing, he can act. He's probably one of the most handsome men you'll ever see anywhere. And he had a charisma about him that people are just drawn to him.
The conservative press savaged Elvis in his earliest days, referring to his grunt and groin antics and labeling him Elvis the Pelvis. The Catholic Church even sent a letter to J. Edgar Hoover, claiming that Elvis's arousal of teenage youth was a danger to the security of the United States. But his detractors did nothing to dent his popularity, and Elvis became such a part of the social fabric that by 1970 he was visiting President Nixon to express his patriotism. Elvis had a bizarre interest in policing and was known to arrive at traffic accidents and help out local authorities. Like any good lawman, guns were a part of his life, and he'd used them in some quite unusual ways.
Well, some of the things that we have on exhibit here pertaining to Elvis's life after dark would be some items from upstairs from his bedroom, including a fiber optic light that used to sit on top of his TV. We have it actually sitting on top of one of the television sets that Elvis actually shot out from his Palm Springs home.
But guns weren't Elvis's only vice. Although in public he was deeply opposed to recreational drugs, in private he became seriously addicted to prescription medication. And after divorcing his wife Priscilla, things got worse. Combined with a heavy diet of junk food, his drug use caused his weight to balloon, and he lived in a constant fog of uppers and downers.
Elvis was involved in prescribed medication. That went from use to abuse. For example, Elvis was like 165, 168, 72, 73, up until 74. 75, about 200, 76, 77, 255. These were results of medications prescribed by doctors that Elvis took on a regular basis. This went from a use to abuse scenario.
The drug abuse took its toll, and Elvis was found dead on the bathroom floor of his Graceland home in Memphis in August 1977. An autopsy reportedly revealed the presence of 14 different drugs in his bloodstream. But despite his tragic exit at just 42 years of age, Elvis Presley will forever be remembered by his millions of fans simply as the king.
Man, I mean, he was a highly spiritual individual. He had a tremendous charisma and magnetism about him that goes beyond explanation. I mean, if Elvis Presley walked into this building today, I would feel the presence of him. I mean, that's how strong his presence was.
Just how do you define Russell Brand? Comedian, actor, columnist, musician, author and presenter. He's got a taste for the flamboyant and has described his dress sense as S&M Willy Wonka. His breakthrough in the United States came with the 2008 romantic comedy Forgetting Sarah Marshall, in which he played the title character's ego-mad rock star boyfriend.
And then they said, there's a porn scene. And I thought, oh, porn! And then it was just like a porn from chess.
Yeah, it was a very confusing day for Russell.
Why do they keep confusing me?
But trouble really hit home for Russell in the wake of the prank calls he and BBC personality Jonathan Ross made to actor Andrew Sachs as part of Russell's BBC radio show. During the call, Andrew Sachs was led to believe that Russell had slept with his 20-something granddaughter.
Put Jonathan Ross and Russell Brand in the same studio, you could have predicted quite straightforwardly that was likely to be a risky situation. So this isn't rocket science, I don't think, but we are strengthening our arrangements in that area.
Since referring to George Bush as that retarded cowboy fella at the MTV Awards, Russell has become engaged to American singer-songwriter Katy Perry, stating that it's time for him to settle down. Only time will tell the strength of his convictions.